In today's video, we're going to do something to make those long highway drives a little more enjoyable. We're going to add a Rostra Cruise Control system to our old Westy. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Nate, and this is That Baldwin Life, where we do epic road trip adventures and DIY projects for your Vanagon. Today, we'll put the Rostra Cruise Control system in our van to make some of those longer drives a bit more bearable. We decided to piece this system together ourselves versus buying the GoWesty kit because, well, for one, when I went to buy it, the GoWesty kit was out of stock. We want to get this done before we take a trip this fall, and so we started piecing it together ourselves. I do think though that the GoWesty system is well priced for what you get. They do all the work for you. They do have a unique installation system where they do it up front. So if you're just willing to get something and you wait for it to be in stock, that's probably the way to go. But since we pieced ours together, I'll go over the list of parts that we have. I'll also put all the parts in the description down below. The first thing, of course, is the cruise control system. This is basically the box that Rostra gives you. It's the control box with the cable. This cable then attaches to your throttle and allows it to, as it controls, it pulls the cable and keeps the tension on that. It also has this giant mess of wires we have to find somewhere to go with. So that will all get installed as well. Those are the things that came with the Rostra kit. Now you need a way to control it as well. The kit we bought didn't have a control system, no switches up front. Because we wanted to buy a separate system. Now GoWesty uses a little control pad that goes on your steering wheel or dash, which seems to work well, but we want something that was more like a newer car. And we tried to source a Vanagon cruise control stalk, but those are unobtainium, and we just couldn't find one. So we picked up this one from Rostra, which goes on up by the steering wheel, and we're gonna add this by our turn signal, so it has all the switches on there already. The things we had to buy from GoWesty though, because the Rostra didn't come with it, really is a speed sensor. Since our van doesn't have cruise control, of course, there's no speed sensor on the back of the speedometer. So GoWesty does a nice job of remaking a speed sensor that you plug into the back of the speedometer, just like the factory one does. We'll put that one in. To cancel the cruise control, the Rostra system uses the brake light switch. Well, since the Vanagon has a pressure switch, it takes a bit of effort to really get that to cancel. And we have a manual transmission, so we need to be able to have the clutch or the clutch pedal also cancel it. So we end up buying two of these switches from GoWesty as well that go on the brake pedal and the clutch pedal. Of course, with the Rostra systems also a general bag of parts we'll sort through because this is a general system for almost any vehicle. So we'll sort through how do we attach it to the throttle body, where do we mount the unit, and of course all the wiring that goes with it as well. So let's get started. So we're here in the engine compartment. This is the throttle body on our Vanagon, and this is where the control cable we need to hook up to so it can pull and keep you at 60 miles an hour, whatever you choose, but that cable will connect back here and pull that direction. So it has to loop either from the sides or be in the back somewhere, but it's got to be pulling that direction. I've seen some people put it in this corner over here, but since we moved our coil and our relay panel a little bit to account for our oil cooler, that's going to be tough for us. The other spot I've seen people put it is in this corner, which is really nice because it can loop up through there really well. But we have our oil air separator right here, which gets in the way, and there just isn't a lot of room over here. One of my concerns is to have, if I put it in the engine compartment and it's in the way for future work, or I have to move it to get to something else, that's kind of a pain in the butt. Once I set this thing and get the dip switches correct, I should never have to touch it again. So I'm going to put it somewhere that's completely out of the way of the engine compartment. Why are we underneath the van? Well, this is where we're going to put our control box. It's a little bit different than anywhere else I've seen, but I think it's going to work out well for us. So here's the control box, and here is, of course, the cable that we need to run all the way up to the engine compartment. So we're going to put this right here. So we're going to drill a small hole through this little cross member where the brake lines and stuff go through. And we're going to mount it. It mounts up this way up top, right in here. And so it doesn't fit, of course, quite yet because of the hole. But so basically put up in here, it'll be up under the frame rails. This cable will then run up into the engine compartment and give us a very straight shot to pull on the back of that throttle body. You might be asking yourself, well, Nate, won't that get wet down there? And the answer is yes, it will. We've been known to go through some deep water crossings, some mud, so it's going to take some abuse down there. And the system says it is weatherproof, but I don't know how waterproof it really is over the long term. So, GoWesty puts it inside the van up front, which is a really safe place for it. I don't particularly care that much for the cable routing up front, and it has all that friction to pull on the cable. The engine compartment can be much cleaner, but as you saw, we just don't have a ton of room. So to solve that, we have this little waterproof case we picked up from Amazon. We'll mount this up under the van, mount the unit inside. We'll drill a hole for the cable, a small hole for the wiring harness with grommets, and we'll seal those up. And this will then screw on from the bottom side and keep all the water and debris out, hopefully. Okay, we're back under the van. We're gonna mark where we put this box. We're gonna put it a little away from the end here so we have some play. We're gonna put it about right there, I think. So we'll mark this corner and this corner. And we have to find a way to span this a bit more because I don't want to drill through the floor, of course, because that's the floor. So these little flanges here will drill through. And I happen to have found this perfect piece of metal I had from something. It literally fits in here perfect and spans it. So that's going to make that really nice. We'll get that bolted up inside there, and this will be our support for our box so we can bolt it up on all four corners. Okay, it's all in, it's mounted, it's super solid. And now we're gonna take it all back down so we can put the control box inside of it, drill the holes and get it all mounted up. So this control box mounts with this part down, I guess, because this is the where you need to access the dip switches. So this needs to be out. So the box is gonna be mounted up there, this will be mounted like this. And so we need to find center where this is gonna be. I'm gonna put a mark at center. And we'll have to drill a hole for that to poke through with the grommet, and then of course a hole for the wiring harness to poke through as well. We'll sit in there like that. And this will go. Okay, we're all done with the box. It's all mounted in. It's got grommets on both sides. I added a small plate on the back side in addition to the plastic so it doesn't want to rock. This has a little bit of force that pulls in. Probably not a big deal, but it was cheap and easy to do. So we're gonna mount this back in the van, route the cable to the engine, and do the next part. So everything's all mounted up now. Box is in there. It's all ran. I ran it through the cross member right there. Oops, sorry, you can see right there, through a grommet, and then up through another grommet through there, and up to the engine compartment. We've got the box mounted down below, the cable routed. Now we gotta connect the cable to the throttle body. And we're gonna use this little loop connector that they give you in the kit. This will go on the barrel where the cable goes into the throttle body. So we need to connect these two pieces together, make sure there's enough slack, and everything operates smoothly. I'm gonna start by taking this bolt out of the barrel here. Cable's out. Here's the bolt. Take this, we'll slide it through like that, and put the cable back in. Nice and snug, you don't have to come out. Now we've got this cable inside of there. We'll pull on the throttle body. The cable on the throttle body. Here's the cable coming from the control unit. This part here needs to be secured so the outside sheath doesn't move. So I think we're going to use this tower where the throttle body, the throttle cable attaches to. We're going to take this clip off, and then we're going to take and bolt this, and we're going to put a hole in So we can put this adapter they give you, and this will clip in, and the unit will then screw. This will screw over this sheath, and that will then secure the cable housing to the transmission. So we're back under the van. As you can see, it's a bit awkward here. I didn't grab the end of the cable. What I need to do is thread the sheath, which sounds kind of odd, but that's what they recommend you do, or you need to do, to secure the cable. So you take one of the nuts they give you, and you start to thread. It should thread easy. It's just plastic. Just make sure you try to get those threads kind of straight. And once you start it, you can take a socket, it's 11 millimeter, and cut threads into that outer sheath right there. What that's going to do is allow that piece that we're going to clip onto the bracket up there to hold it. Now I don't need a ton of threads because I don't have a lot of the housing or the sheath sticking out. Okay, so you can see on there maybe that there's some threads cut on there, and that will allow this piece to thread on. There we go, we got it back on. We slid the bracket over the cable first, and then we threaded on that plastic connector till it was just inside, maybe about halfway, and we snapped it in, we bolted it all back up. And that all looks pretty factory. Pretty happy with that. So now we got that all done, we have those two cables right there to connect. Remember, when the throttle's at a closed position, there needs to be just a little bit of slack in that cable. So we use those chain connectors they give you and the little clasp to make that happen. There's the chain, and there's one of the clasps. We'll use two of those. One clasp will go on each end of that cable, and we'll just cut the number of beads we need to make that cable just have a little slack in it. We've measured ours about 1 inch, but we're going to cut one extra one just to see. Cut that right there. As you can see, that's way too much slack. So we'll cut another ball out and just keep going until we have the right amount. What's we ended up with? Down to 3, which seems to be a pretty good. If I took 2, it'd be too tight. It's a little slack than I want, but that should be just fine. You're supposed to put the shrink wrap, those shrink sleeves over those brass connectors, which we will when we're all done. We want to make sure this all works right. That's just so the chain doesn't slip out. Well, that wraps up the installation of the control box and the throttle body linkage. So now we have the wiring to do. We have the brake and clutch switches up front, as well as the speed sensor. So let's get the wiring started. We're fortunate we already have the holes drilled for both brake and clutch switches. These are from GoWesty. These will bolt right here, and then we'll just line this lever up at the top of the pedal or the arm. We'll bend this a little bit so it just clicks when you tap on the clutch or the brake. Just when you push the clutch, you hear that click right there. That'll disengage the cruise control. We'll do the same thing for the brake. Pliers and pull on that little tab there. Like that. Comes with 2 little screws, so don't lose these. And this puts right in here, that goes in one way. Pops right. Not too tight, doesn't crack anything, just gonna hold it in place. There you go. You now have a speed sensor on your van. So we saw earlier in the video, we went with a more OEM looking control versus a little panel we'd have to put somewhere. So now we got to find a place to put it. Initially I wanted to combine this turn signal high beam switch with this by cutting it and grafting it. And I still might do that, but we've got a trip coming up here in a couple of weeks. I just don't have time to do all that work. So that will be a future project, I think. But for now, I think we're going to put it on this panel here, just behind there, maybe right around there. We'll take this off. we'll put a threaded rod inside of this and then basically just bolt it on the back with a nut. We'll put some bigger washers on the back side to give a little bit more strength. And then we'll run the wires down and hook it all up. So we have this here. It's got this little set Allen screws in it. It's hollow. A little piece of all thread. We're going to put this in, tighten up those Allens, then we'll drill a hole through and we'll put a nut on the back, and that will secure that in place. So there's the finished piece. It's got a little bolt on the back side that we can tighten it. The reason I did it that way is I can secure the Allen bolts here first and then use this bolt to snug it all together, make it a bit stronger. There's a washer on the back, and we'll put this on now. Here's the finished product right there. Solid. You reach up in the steering wheel, set, do all your work right here. Now the front switches are all installed. We haven't wired them up yet. We've got the wires dangling on the box under the van. And here's the second half of the wiring harness we disconnected. Now what we're going to do is we have to extend the wiring because the box is in the back and all the controls are in the front. So we ran the wire for that already. What we're going to do is we're going to take the ends of this bulkhead connector and cut them off. And we're going to wire them to the end of the extension wires, so if I need to disconnect that box in the future, I can unplug it there and take everything out. And this part will be wired up front in the dash, and we'll solder this end connection to the wire we extended. We'll back under the van and show you what I was talking about there. Here's the wire we ran from the van. There's 8 leads in there, 20 gauge. We ran it above the gas tank and then up to the front of the van. This is our wire extension. We're going to take the harness from the front, cut these ends off, and then solder them on, matching the wires up. And then here's the other end from the control box, which the wire is too long. We're going to shorten this, cut these off, and put them on so we then can disconnect if we need to and take this unit out. So we'll get that all soldered up. We have the first section of wires all soldered up with the shrink tubing on there. It's marine shrink tubing. We'll wait to do all that till we test all the wires to make sure we have good continuity. And we've written down any differences. Luckily there's only one. It was the the orange to gray. The rest all lined up the right colors. All done with the wiring. Split loomed, shrink wrapped, zip tied. All done. So let's go up front now and do the rest. Spared you the monotony of extending out that wire and soldering and shrink wrapping everything. That's done. The harness is back in. We have this mess of wires to clean up. So let's get on that next. I think the manual is pretty clear for the most part for power and ground. That's pretty simple. The speed sensor is the gray wire if you're using off your speedometer. The brake and clutch switch isn't part of this standard kit, so that's a GoWesty kit, so we have to kind of get those two merged together. And of course the control, which is honestly quite easy, it just plugs in. So the bigger thing will be to pull down the fuse box to get power to the back of the fuse box, and find a way to tuck all these wires up nice and neat under the dash so they're easy to work on in the future and they're out of the way. Start with the easy stuff first, I guess, really is. These two connect together for the switch. That's pretty straightforward. But we've got a ton of excess wires, so I'm going to loop this around up in the dash first. We get to the fuse box. I'm going to kind of put it up in here. We'll connect these up. The brown, which is odd, is 12 volts, which is brown for ground is Volkswagen. We're not going to use the brake switch so this won't be used. I made a mistake. The red wire with the fuse needs to be hooked up to power no matter what, even if you're not using the brake switch as a canceling switch. So I have to go back and hook that up as well to switch 12 volt power. The purple will go to our brake and clutch switches. The blue is the tach sensor, which we're not going to use, so we'll ground that. And then the gray goes to the speed sensor. That's all the wires that get up in there. Here's, of course, the GoWesty parts. The red needs power. We'll tap that into the brown on the unit. Black is ground. The gray is the speed sensor. And then, of course, we have the clutch and brake switches down here to route as well. So that's a ton of wires. We'll cut some to length. We'll zip tie some other out of the way. And let's find a way to get it all up in there. So we're looking for G2 or G5 on the back of here. Not sure if mine are still open or not. This is where we're supposed to tap into here, but I've already tapped into it before with this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this butt connector out and then put in wires for the speed sensor and the unit. That way it comes off that ignition switch, off the fuse, and then out to the unit. We have this dark blue wire for the tach over rev, which we're not going to use because we have a clutch disengagement switch. And the instructions say to ground this so it doesn't get any stray signals. So we'll combine the ground for the speed sensor and these to ground. It will go to the grounding tree up there. Now we have the gray speed sensor wire from the GoWesty speed sensor up top, and the gray wire goes back to the control unit. We're going to cut this to length and solder this together. The plug for the control switch just plugs right in. The fuse box is buttoned back up. The wires are all nice, zip tied and tucked out of the way. We left the purple wire down to do our switches, and that's what we'll do next. Everything routed nice and clean out of the way. Switches are done, grounded back on there. Again, purple to one side of the switch into series, and the other side to ground. So the dip switch settings. I probably should have done this when the unit was on a bench. It'd be easier to access, so I had to crawl back underneath there. We're going to start with the GoWesty recommended settings first and see how that is. There's also some great threads on the Samba about other settings. We'll start with the GoWesty ones and see how it goes. All wrapped up back here. We just put the shrink wrap over the barrel connectors to keep those from coming out. So it looks like back here, looks like really a factory type install. In fact, it's more stealth than factory. You can't even see it at all. Back there on the bracket, you've got the cable that we put in. I like the way that turned out a lot. We've got the engine bay all wrapped up. We've got the box all wrapped up. I silicone that shut. The wire goes in to keep additional water out. The dash is all back together. Let's take this on the highway and see how it works. So we're on the highway now. We're going to see if this thing actually works. Turn it on. Push set. Woo. I almost took my hands off the wheel like it's going to drive itself, but here we go. Driving 60 down the highway, no foot on the gas. This is pretty amazing. So what are our thoughts? Pretty awesome. We did have a little bit of surging on, when I get up to speed, it would kind of go up above it, below a little bit. We pulled over and adjusted the dip switch settings a little bit, and most of that went away. It was nice and consistent. I'll put those here in the video so you can see what we ended up with. The installation was pretty simple. I made it a bit more complicated by putting the box underneath and stuff, but we really like the way that turned out. The wiring is pretty simple, but I did make a wiring diagram here for anyone who has some questions about how to put the GoWesty switches in with a Rostra kit. In the description, I will list all of the parts we used and their approximate cost at the time of the video to see, which you want to go with, the GoWesty kit or build your own. Either way, we're super happy with it. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. We'll get those addressed. Thanks a lot.